Ryan Faith is a contributing editor at Vice News. He joins me with more on the success in the skies as we just saw. So Ryan, was this a lucky landing, or could we see some repeat performances from SpaceX? Are we any closer to having tourists in space, or even a city in Mars as Elon Musk's hopes for?
I don't think it's, I think it would be wrong to characterize this as a luck. I think they did a pretty solid job on the engineering. This is their third attempt to land a rocket like this, and the previous two have failed, so they've been sort of closing in on this. In terms of whether or not it's going to put us on Mars right tomorrow, it's the difference between saying that I'm going to send my kid to Harvard and having a child. There's a lot, it's an important, critical first step, but there's a lot of subsequent work that has to take place.
Well, and as we've seen, this company has seen failure. They continue to try again with a reusable rocket, reusable being the key word here.
The first failure is actually not even for reusable rockets, which gets to the important part about this, is that the margins for spaceflight are incredibly tiny, so that there's very, very little room to play with on the margin to start adding landing gear, to keep extra fuel on board, to change your trajectory. You just don't have any room for air at all. So the ability to squeeze that design margin into reusability, or into a landing at least, is why it's taken decades to get to this point, but it's also why it's such a big deal.
And we saw their celebration in their control room, if you will. How significant was this success?
Well, I think this is the kind of thing that's going to be very significant for people in the industry, certainly for the engineering and aerospace communities. But this is one part in a really long process. It's kind of like during going to the phase when the U.S. was trying to go to the moon. We had lots of intermediate missions where they'd send somebody into space for 2 weeks, or they'd practice rendezvous and docking, or they'd develop one key capability, and you couldn't get there without it, but it's still a long way off from your final goal.
We're all watching this, obviously. It's kind of exciting and very interesting. How closely do you think are governments watching what these private companies are doing, Russia, the United States, China? And how does this change the face of what's happening in their programs? Will this take some of the politics out of dealing with one another if these private companies continue to be successful?
Well, there's two big axes on that. The first is industry-to-industry cooperation versus government-to-government cooperation, and adding that sort of separate channel for, let's say, cooperation between the U.S. and Russia, or the U.S. and China, changes the political dynamic pretty significantly, but that's still a little bit of a ways off quite yet. In terms of the technology, I'm fairly certain that they're paying very close attention, because what Elon Musk and Jeff Bezos and these other entrepreneurs have been doing is really causing people to rethink their appetite for risk, for how their technological innovation, for how bold they are, and doing things that have been sort of bandied about a lot or discussed but never really put into practice.
So will they be used by governments? Do you think either their technology, or do you think they will be partnering with a NASA or a Russian space agency?
Well, right now SpaceX delivers cargo to the space station, a rocket like this, but it's not being used in a reusable fashion. And in a few years they should be transporting crew. So I think that this is it's one of those things that I would say that 10 years ago, I thought I'd never go to space in my lifetime. Now it's like, well, maybe in 30 or 40 years. So it's a long way to go, but it's still much faster than never.
I want to ask you about something we heard about in our story, and on social media it's been big. Some competition, I guess, from Amazon founder CEO Jeff Bezos tweeting SpaceX, congratulations. Are these space companies sort of a new status symbol, if you will, for these tech billionaires?
I would say they're a status symbol only for tech billionaires who have a real deep passion for space. I don't think it's going to be a vanity purchase anytime soon. There's a saying about it, is that a great way to get a small fortune is to start with a big fortune and start working on space. So these are going to be long cost, very expensive, long lead time projects, and they're doing it because they're interested more than turning a buck on it.
So who's next to jump in, do you think?
Oh, wow. Who's next? That I'm not going to take any guesses on. I'm perfectly happy to be surprised by that.
Elon Musk and Jeff Bezos, both very high-profile people, have their space companies. I guess we'll have to see who else jumps in next, but
Indeed.
Some exciting stuff indeed. Ryan Faith, Vice News, thank you so much for joining us.